My name is Luke Urbonavicius. I'm a sophomore, and my major is environmental studies.
Where are you from, Luke?
I'm from Plattsmouth, Nebraska. That's where I consider my hometown, but I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay. You are also from Lithuania, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So my parents both immigrated from Lithuania in '92 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Once they did that, my brother was born here about the same year in '92 as well. They moved back to Lithuania for a few years, and then in '98 they moved back again, and I was born in '98, and then we settled here in Lithuania or in the United States. Yeah, the Highland Games, a lot of fun. Not necessarily a Lithuanian thing, but it's regional, kind of like in that Northern Europe, which is interesting. The Highland Games were some of the oldest sporting events in the world. They were kind of the predecessor to, I guess, your like track and field events that you might see like in Greek culture that became more popular. The Highland Games are all competed with, there's multiple events. They have like track and field events as well. There's running, there's cycling, there's a style of Scottish wrestling, but the ones I competed in were the heavy events, and that's where you throw stuff. And I was able to compete internationally at the Cerys Highland Games in Scotland, north of Edinburgh, and it was definitely a really fun experience with that. So the Highland Games I wouldn't consider part of Lithuanian culture. There are similar aspects that are you could see between the two, such as like tests of manhood and tests of strength and stuff like that. Like we both have like the lifting stones where you have to like lift a stone onto a certain area to like prove you're an adult or kind of you're a man at that point. And there's other similar ones too as well, but the Highland Games themselves aren't.
Have you tested out if you're a man?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm a man, come on. So each games themselves will have some similar events, but also some different ones. The recurring ones I would compete in would be the weight for distance, which is a 56-pound, I guess, iron block with a D handle on it. You throw that as far as you can horizontally, and you can essentially use any method as long as it leaves with one hand. There's a weight for height, which is the same weight they use, 56 pounds, but you go for a vertical distance. It's similar to like a pole vault, so it keeps increasing in height with that. There's the sheaf toss, which is essentially a pitchfork and a hay bale, and you throw that for height the same way. That one's a struggle, just because it's not very, yeah, definitely. There's the open stone, which is what you would see or compare it to as the shot put. It's any technique you want to use as long as it leaves the nape of your neck, similar to a shot put. And then my favorite one I was able to compete in, oh, there's two more, sorry. There's the caber toss, which is essentially half a telephone pole, roughly 200-something pounds. Some are heavier, some are lighter, depending on where you're at. You have to throw that for distance or for technique, and the technique aspect is you want to throw it so it flips over itself. So they measure where you release it, and then where that part ends up is where they measure the distance. And technique is if you can get it at the perfect 12 o'clock position, which is extremely difficult. Some people launch that thing, but yeah, I had a bad experience with it. It was my first time actually throwing the caber. I got it up to my shoulder. This thing's like 200-something pounds, which isn't super heavy if you've been training for it, but it's just so tall and like kind of off balanced, you know? And it ended up falling backwards and breaking the sound system behind me, and they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, I put this huge dent in this like iron bar. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys. And then my most memorable event, I would say, is called the Cerys Stone, which is local to the Cerys Highland Games. Like I said, some events have local events that might be more popular there, which was this 100-pound rock that they found, and it's been at the Cerys Highland Games since it was founded in 1314. So it's a very old, like, historical stone, and you just have to throw that as far as you can, essentially.
Allow you to throw the
Yeah.
really old stone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Wow.
it's what it's there for, you know. But I think the world record, or not the world record, I guess the games record for that stone hasn't been broken in like 60 years or something. Like, it's just like such a historical stone, and just being able to throw that was kind of an honor and a privilege in itself.
That's crazy. So what do you wear during these games?
So there's a required uniform. It's a kilt, essentially. That's the only rule. It's a kilt, and you have to. Some games make you wear like the longer socks as well, that go like just below the knee. So it's like soccer socks, I guess. They have to like match your kilt in like the color and the tartan style.
So how many times have you competed in the games?
The Saturdays Highland Games would be my first international meet, and I competed in a couple amateur ones locally in Nebraska.
Wow. Oh, so it's a pretty big thing in Nebraska, would you say?
It's decently sized. I wouldn't say it's big compared to like I know like on the east and west coast they have like huge Highland Games and festivals that like are like that would blow these ones out of the water. But this one's just like groups of guys that just found the sport and like it. I found through a YouTube channel by finding like I was looking for like weightlifting videos for like technique and stuff like that, and I found this one guy, Matt Vincent. He was like a multi-time Highland Games champion. And there's like videos of him like throwing in kilts and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I was like, is this a real sport? Like, is he crazy? Is he the only one just doing it for fun? But I found the sport through that because it involves a lot of speed and agility and technique and just being strong in general. Because even though like 56 pounds, it's not relatively heavy. There's things that are heavier. Like for most strength athletes, when you're squatting 500 or deadlifting 600, 56 pounds isn't heavy. But like having the agility and having like the core strength and the body awareness to move that quickly around you and throw it like 40, 50 feet, like it's a testament to your strength and ability. So I found that really exciting and like really interesting to me. So I wanted to dive deeper into that. So I started training and like finding videos and changing my training regimen from just lifting heavy weights and getting big to being more of an athlete and kind of like carrying over into that. So that's kind of where I led into. I was kind of wanting to get that athletic mindset and style back into my life. I would say I found interest in the games and started practicing for them maybe 3 years ago or so. So maybe a year after I graduated high school.
So you can also speak Lithuanian.
Yes.
So,
I could say my name. Mano vardas yra Lukas Urbonavicius. That means my name is Luke Urbonavicius. Lukas is the equivalent to Luke in Lithuanian. Another phrase is like kur tu nori valgyt, like where do you want to eat? It's a very old language. It's like one of the closest language to it is Sanskrit. So that'll tell you how old it is, like it's up in there with like Hebrew and stuff like that too.
Wow.
So it's a very, very old language.
how would you say, let's go Doane?
Let's go Doane. Einam Doane. That's about it, So yeah, so the problem with Lithuanian is because it's such an old language, there's a lot of words that just don't exist.
Yeah.
So we have to either steal them or not steal them, but take them from other languages like Russian or English, or just make them sound more Lithuanian.
Okay.
So like universities, like universitetas, we just add the AS to it to make it sound more Lithuanian, stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that makes cultural sense to Lithuanians as well, that will make sense to like, I guess like other regions or like Americans. Like an insult, for example, would be to call somebody a grybas, which means mushroom, which doesn't make any sense because like, why would you call somebody a mushroom? Yeah. But if you think about it, it's like, what does a mushroom do? It doesn't do anything. It just kind of, it kind of sits there. So it's kind of like that, like, so that's kind of like the idea behind that. There's like phrases where I remember for my parents, like anniversary or something like that, our neighbors who have known for a very long time use Google Translate to get this like embroidery on this little like wine glass or something.
Wow, that's really nice.
But the translation that they wanted to say was like, be close to your neighbors, as in like an emotional feeling, it makes sense in English, but they had written and it translated to what meant to literally be close to your neighbor, as in like physically, like just to stand next to them. So that's just like an interesting way of like seeing how like, it doesn't directly translate, and in the context, it won't make any sense either. So this tattoo, it's not necessarily Lithuanian, it's Baltic, which is the region Lithuania is in. It's just a symbology, like old pagan, because Lithuania was the last country in Europe to be Christianized, or in like the early 1400s or so, I think. So a lot of our traditions and stuff is still based around like that kind of like our old culture, our old tradition. You know, we take a lot of pride in that. So you'll see a lot of tattoos with this, or a lot of Lithuanians with this style of tattoo and stuff like that. We take a lot of pride in like in nature and stuff like that. So like the arrows here are like representative of like trees and like new fates and like new beginnings and stuff like that. This represents like kind of like masculinity and like leadership and strength and stuff like that. And the bottom portion here is strength and new beginnings, essentially. So it's an interesting tattoo. Not particularly Lithuanian, but Baltic to the region, you know, so.
Does that tattoo have any significance to you?
Yeah, I got it through, after I went through some like hardships in life, and it just kind of like each like individual meeting had like its own idea to me. So you can find symbols like these all over, and like I can see people, they've made like patterns out of them that like wrap all the way around and stuff like that. So tattoos are pretty common in Lithuanian culture, I'd say. Like most people would have them. Yeah, I brought a kilt and I brought a Lithuanian jersey. So I couldn't get my, I'm part of a Lithuanian dance group as well.
Yes.
Yeah, but my uniform is at home, so I back with my parents, so I couldn't really bring that. So this is the Lithuanian 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, the summer ones. That's the jersey for it. So you can see like the pattern kind of like is similar to the one that's like on my forearm. You can see like a lot of that, this cross stitching and stuff like that as well. I don't know how well you can see that. But yeah, so we take a lot of pride in like a lot of older traditions and culture and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the Lithuanian national symbol, the Vytis. It's a knight chasing away Lithuania's enemies. I think in legend it's wolves or something like that. And people have that tattooed very commonly. That's a very popular symbol to use. So yeah.
So what is this, your kilt?
Yeah, the kilt. So they actually have a brand for the Highland Games called Sport Kilts.
Wow.
Because it's a more popular sport than you'd think. This is it. It's they have different designs, and each clan would have their own design, or for their tartan, which is another name for this. This is the McKay clan kilt, which I got from one of my friends down in KC who said I could use it. McKay is the older version of McCoy, you know, so this is more of like an Irish kilt. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's you're supposed to wear underwear underneath them, so.
Is it an advantage to wear the kilts during the Highland Games?
More free.
You definitely feel more free. You feel more alive. I agree with that. It's a cultural thing, really. It's just the tradition of wearing it. Some people find it kind of like odd to wear it, you know, if you were just a collegiate thrower and you moved into the Highland Games afterwards to get like, just stay active or something, you know, they might be caught off guard by it. But if you're like open to the culture and tradition of wearing it, I know the first time I wore a kilt, I was just like, I feel weird, you know. I've worn pants my entire life. I've never worn a skirt before, you know. But no, it's that mindset changes quickly when you see like 6'7" tall guys, 300 something pounds, like just launching these weights like 50 feet, you know, and you're just like, all right, the kilt works, you know, like something's working.
It's like the mindset do you ever like miss Lithuania at all?
Yeah, so growing up, my family and I would go there every summer. So it was essentially a second home to me. I'd spend my summers in Lithuania and then my other seasons here. My entire family is there, aside from my parents, my older brother. We're the only ones that live in the state. We have a cousin that lives in Chicago that moved here fairly recently. But like all my cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, all in Lithuania. So yeah, so there is like a longingness, you know, to be back in that like environment and stuff.
Are Lithuanian women the most beautiful women in the world?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Yeah, ask any Lithuanian that. Yeah, they'll agree. Yeah, I remember, so my parents want me to marry a Lithuanian girl, you know. But there's a lot of Lithuanian youths, American Lithuanian youths, like myself in Chicago and Oregon and New York and stuff like that. And Chicago is the hub of like Lithuanians outside of Lithuania. A lot of them in there. And my parents go to Chicago pretty often because my parents are very involved in the Lithuanian American community. and I'll go with him a lot of the times too. And like my dad's like, oh, he's following my footsteps. It's like, yeah, it's also to see some pretty girls too, you know.
Do you ever think about like ever moving to Lithuania?
It's definitely not a foreign idea to me. I've heard a lot of stories. I always think of America as like my real home because I was born here, I grew up here, you know, like in the house I was Lithuanian, but everywhere else I was American, you know. But I've heard multiple stories of people going back and like moving to Lithuania, even though they spent their entire lives in the States, or moving to Lithuania, even though they spent their entire lives in the States. And it's definitely not a foreign idea at all. It's a very like progressive community and society. They're taking huge steps economically and technology-wise. It's not a struggling country at all, I would say. The downtown Vilnius, which is the capital of Lithuania, is like on par with like downtown Chicago, kind of in terms of like entertainment, like restaurants, you know, like the nightlife there. Like, you know, some people think of Lithuania, they think of this like a small Baltic country, not a whole lot to offer, you know, farmland and stuff like that, but it's a very prosperous country now. You know, there's a joke going on right now in Lithuania that if you go to Vilnius, the downtown, and you walk around, Lithuanian will be the last language you'll hear because there's like French and Italian and Spanish and English speakers there too as well. You know, it's a very business-oriented country now. I would say just like, you know, be open to like new experiences, stuff like that. Like, I take after my parents a lot when I like take risks and stuff like that. They came to the United States not knowing any English. They learned English from watching Friends and The Simpsons. So it's just kind of like taking that back step and like looking at all your options available and like what's the best decision you can make for yourself and for your children in the future, you know, and like taking those big risks, you know. So, yeah.